What if everything you learned about ancient civilizations in school was incomplete? Not necessarily wrong, but carefully edited, selectively presented, designed to fit a narrative that serves a specific worldview. Today we're going to challenge that narrative. We're going to dig beneath the surface of accepted history and ask the questions that make academics uncomfortable. Because the truth about our ancient past is far more complex, far more fascinating, and perhaps far more unsettling than the sanitized version we've been fed. For centuries we've been taught about the grandeur of ancient civilizations. The pyramids of Egypt rising from the desert sands. The marble temples of Greece gleaming white against the Mediterranean sky. The Roman aqueducts carrying water across impossible distances. These monuments are presented to us as the crowning achievements of human ingenuity, the pinnacle of ancient engineering. And they are magnificent, there's no denying that. But have you ever stopped to think about the stories that have been left untold? The ones that don't make it into our history books? The narratives that would force us to completely reconsider everything we think we know about human development? Let's pause for a moment and think about how history is actually written. Who decides what's important enough to remember? Who chooses which civilizations get chapters in textbooks and which ones are relegated to footnotes? Traditional narratives often paint a narrow picture, focusing on conquests and monarchs, on wars and empires, on the rise and fall of dynasties. But what about the everyday people? What about their cultures, their innovations, their ways of thinking that didn't involve conquest or domination? This limited view has led to a collective misunderstanding of the complexities and achievements of these ancient societies. We've been trained to see history as a series of battles and treaties, of great men making great decisions. But history is so much more than that. They had agendas, whether conscious or unconscious, that shaped how they presented the past. I'm talking about something deeper, something more fundamental. It's not just the structures themselves that hold secrets. It's the way we interpret them, the way we've been taught to understand them, the lens through which we view the entire ancient world. And let's be honest about something that historians rarely admit. The way we interpret history is almost always influenced by the perspectives of those who wrote it. And those who wrote the history books, the chroniclers and scholars of previous centuries, were often biased by their own cultural assumptions. Think about it. Most of our understanding of ancient history comes from sources written hundreds or even thousands of years after the events they describe. The ancient Greeks we study so reverently? Much of what we know about them comes from Roman sources written centuries later. The ancient Egyptians? Our interpretation of their civilization was shaped primarily by 19th century European archaeologists who brought their own Victorian-era assumptions to the artifacts they uncovered. This isn't a minor detail. It's fundamental to understanding why our history books might be giving us an incomplete picture. By looking at the evidence with fresh eyes and reevaluating our assumptions, we can start to uncover the real stories behind these ancient civilizations. We can begin to see patterns that previous generations missed. We can ask questions that were never asked before. It's time to challenge the status quo and dig deeper into the past. And when we do that, when we really start examining the evidence without the filter of accepted narrative, something remarkable happens. The neat, orderly timeline we've been taught begins to fall apart. Let me give you a concrete example of how our understanding has been limited. The Maya civilization is often remembered for its impressive calendar systems and monumental architecture. You've probably seen pictures of Chichen Itza or Tikal, those stepped pyramids rising from the jungle. You might have heard about their calendar that supposedly predicted the end of the world in 2012. But that's where most people's knowledge stops. What's far less known, what doesn't get the same attention in textbooks or documentaries, is the Maya's advanced understanding of astronomy and mathematics that rivals and in some ways exceeds what we consider modern knowledge. The Maya didn't just look at the stars for mystical purposes. They calculated, they measured, they predicted. Their knowledge of the movements of the stars and planets was incredibly accurate, achieved without telescopes, without modern instruments, without any of the technology we consider essential for astronomical observation. They could predict solar eclipses with precision that wouldn't be matched in Europe for another 1,000 years. They understood the concept of zero in mathematics, a concept that many so-called advanced civilizations struggled with for centuries. Their mathematical concepts were far ahead of their time, and in some cases, ahead of what we give them credit for even now. But here's what makes this even more interesting. The Maya weren't alone in possessing knowledge that seems out of place for their supposed level of development. The Indus Valley Civilization is another perfect example of a society that's often misunderstood or simply ignored in popular historical narratives. While we dedicate entire courses to Rome and Greece, the Indus Valley people, who were building sophisticated cities at the same time, get barely a mention. Why is that? Is it because their civilization didn't conquer its neighbors? Is it because they left behind fewer written records? Or is it because their achievements don't fit the neat progression we like to imagine for human development? The Indus Valley people built cities with advanced sewage systems that wouldn't be matched in Europe until the 19th century. Think about that for a moment. 4,000 years ago, these people had better sanitation than Victorian London. They had urban planning that shows a level of organization and engineering knowledge that supposedly didn't exist yet. Their architecture wasn't just functional, it was precisely calculated. Buildings aligned to cardinal directions, streets laid out in perfect grids, drainage systems that still work today. And perhaps most remarkably, their societal structures appear to have been remarkably egalitarian, with no evidence of a ruling elite, no massive palaces, no monuments to kings or emperors. This contradicts almost everything we're taught about ancient civilizations, that they require hierarchy, require domination, require a ruling class to function. The more we learn about these ancient civilizations, the more we're forced to reevaluate our assumptions about human history. And one of the most surprising discoveries, one that historians are still grappling with, is the connection between ancient cultures that supposedly never had contact with each other. Similar architectural styles appearing on opposite sides of the planet. Mathematical concepts developing independently in cultures separated by oceans. Agricultural techniques that seem to spread faster than could be explained by simple trade routes. It's as if there was a shared body of knowledge, a common foundation that these civilizations were all drawing from. And what about the innovations and ideas we take for granted today? We act as if we invented everything, as if human ingenuity began with the Industrial Revolution. But the truth is that many of our most fundamental technologies and concepts have their roots in ancient civilizations. The Egyptians didn't just build pyramids. They practiced advanced medicine. They performed surgeries. They understood human anatomy in ways that wouldn't be rediscovered in Europe until the Renaissance. They had specialized physicians for different ailments. They used anesthetics. They set bones and treated infections. This wasn't primitive medicine. This was a sophisticated medical system. The Mesopotamians gave us more than just the wheel. They created the first written language. They developed mathematics. They invented the concept of time as we know it, dividing the day into hours, the hour into minutes. They created legal codes, systems of governance, agricultural innovations that allowed them to feed large populations in an unforgiving climate. When you check the time on your phone, when you use a written language, when you reference any law or legal principle, you're using concepts that were refined or invented in ancient Mesopotamia. But here's where it gets really interesting, where the official narrative starts to crack under scrutiny. If these ancient civilizations were so advanced, if they possessed knowledge and capabilities that we're only now beginning to fully appreciate, how did that knowledge disappear? We're told about dark ages, about collapses, about knowledge being lost. But does that explanation really hold up? Can you lose something as fundamental as advanced mathematics? Can an entire civilization forget how to do something they did for centuries? Or is there another explanation, one that requires us to rethink the entire timeline we've been given? Consider the structures themselves. The pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Baalbek, the massive stones of Sacsayhuaman in Peru. We're told they were built with primitive tools, with copper chisels and wooden rollers, with manpower alone. But when modern engineers try to replicate these achievements using those same methods, they fail. They can't cut the stones with that precision. They can't move blocks weighing hundreds of tons. They can't achieve the astronomical alignments that these ancient builders accomplished with supposed ease. So either our ancestors possessed capabilities we've lost, or the official timeline is missing something crucial. Look at the Antikythera mechanism discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. This bronze device, dated to around 100 BCE, is essentially an ancient analog computer used to predict astronomical positions and eclipses. When it was first X-rayed and studied, researchers were stunned. Nothing even remotely similar appears in the historical record for another 1,000 years. It's as if someone dropped a laptop into ancient Greece. The craftsmanship, the knowledge required to build such a device, suggests a level of technological sophistication that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of that time period. Or consider the Baghdad battery, jars discovered in Iraq that appear to be ancient electrical cells. The Damascus steel that could cut through European swords like butter, a manufacturing process we still can't fully replicate today. The Roman concrete that has lasted 2,000 years while modern concrete crumbles after decades. The ancient Indian texts that describe flying machines and weapons that sound remarkably like modern technology. We're told these are myths, exaggerations, misunderstandings. But are they? Or are we dismissing evidence that doesn't fit our preconceived notions of what ancient people were capable of? The more you examine the evidence without bias, the more you realize that the standard narrative of human progress, of a steady climb from primitive to advanced, from stone tools to smartphones, is far too simplistic. Human history isn't a straight line. It's a complex web of rises and falls, of knowledge gained and lost, of civilizations that achieved remarkable things and then disappeared, leaving behind only monuments and mysteries. This realization has significant implications for how we view our own culture and achievements. We like to think we're at the pinnacle of human development, that we're the most advanced civilization that has ever existed. But what if we're not? What if we're actually rebuilding, relearning, rediscovering knowledge that was once common? What if the ancients knew things we're only now beginning to understand? The implications are staggering. It means our entire conception of progress might be wrong. It means history might not be linear but cyclical. It means there might have been civilizations before ours that rose to great heights and then fell, leaving behind only fragments for us to puzzle over. And here's the uncomfortable truth that emerges when you follow this line of thinking. If ancient civilizations were more advanced than we give them credit for, if they possessed knowledge and capabilities that match or exceed our own in certain areas, then their collapse wasn't just a historical footnote. It was a catastrophe. Something happened. Something global, something devastating enough to bring down multiple advanced civilizations across the planet. The question isn't just what they knew, it's what happened to them. And more importantly, could it happen to us? In summary, it's time to completely rethink our understanding of ancient history by exploring the overlooked truths and hidden stories, by examining the evidence that doesn't fit the standard narrative, by asking uncomfortable questions about timelines and capabilities. We can gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities and achievements of ancient civilizations. But more than that, we can begin to understand that human history is far stranger and far more sophisticated than we've been taught. The ancient world wasn't primitive. It wasn't simple. It wasn't a stepping stone to our supposedly superior modern civilization. It was something else entirely. Something we're only beginning to comprehend. The monuments stand. The evidence remains. The questions persist. And the more we look, really look at what our ancestors left behind, the more we realize that the greatest mystery isn't what they built. It's what they knew, and why we've forgotten it. So, what do you think? Does the evidence suggest we've been told an incomplete story about our ancient past? Are there civilizations whose achievements we've deliberately downplayed or misunderstood? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this investigation into hidden history intrigues you, stay tuned, because we've only scratched the surface. There are deeper mysteries waiting, questions that will challenge everything you thought you knew about where we came from and where we might be heading.